These are my grandkids. Aren't they cute? Wait. Here are my grandkids last week making the argument that since broccoli is disgusting, they are not going to eat it. I stare at them, and I'm amazed. Of course, they're my grandkids, but I'm amazed especially because they have a superpower. They, like all of us, can communicate. You see, communication is kind of my thing. As we heard earlier, I am a speaking coach, and over the years, I have watched thousands of adults as they struggle to learn how to communicate better. And with the arrival of AI, I am convinced now more than ever that when it comes to dialogue, if we don't use it, we'll lose it. I mean, if we decide to not use our human superpower of dialogue because it's easier to talk with AI, we risk losing our ability altogether. Now, when I was trying to put together my thoughts for this speech, I kept getting stuck. I had so many ideas in my head, and I really didn't know what to do, so I talked to some of my friends. And I asked them their opinions and some feedback, and we had a little debate. And pretty soon, I had so much confusion in my head that I didn't know what to do at all. I was totally stuck. So I did what many of us do. I went home, fired up my computer, and I asked ChatGPT, "Can you make sense of this?" See? I'm already losing my superpower. And I'm concerned because if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that dialogue is at the heart of human intelligence. I hope that's true. Otherwise, the rest of the speech is going to be really boring. But here's the thing. Dialogue is our superpower. And AI does a really good job with words. It can mix them up and it can use them, but it's always missing that crucial something that makes its communication convincing to we normal thinking and feeling human beings. I think we need to double down on our superpower, our human superpower of dialogue, so that we can step forward into a new world where AI is already seated at the table. To understand why dialogue is such an essential part of us as humans, I'd like to take it back a little bit. I'd like to take it back about 300,000 years. The first Homo sapiens, for them, exchanging information was a question of survival. Where the lions lived, which streams had the most fish, which bushes had berries that would make you sick. Around that fire, storytelling took hold in our brains, and it stayed there. That's why today you'll remember an anecdote long after you've forgotten your Google password. And here's what makes dialogue unique for us. Well, let's go forward in history before we go on to that. Let's go fast forward for a moment to ancient Rome. Still kind of far back, but there, dialogue took center stage in politics. Rhetoric took information, turned it into persuasion that would divide or unite. Fast forward again to the age of science. Galileo named his greatest work dialogue. He framed his radical new ideas as a conversation, showing us that even science advances through dialogue. Now, I could continue on this journey through history, but I think we can all see that throughout history, from survival to philosophy to science, humanity's greatest advancements came on the shoulders of dialogue. Now, just because we've always had dialogue doesn't mean we will always have it in the future, right? History is full of practices that we've abandoned, and rightly so. Slavery, apartheid, asbestos. But dialogue is different. Dialogue is a tool that we use to decide what to abandon or embrace. It's what we use to question injustice, to consider alternatives, and to move forward together. What's uniquely human about dialogue is that when we do it, when we engage in dialogue, we put ourselves at risk. Galileo himself was hauled off to the Inquisition. His book was banned, and he spent the rest of his life under house arrest, all because he dared to discuss that it was the sun, not the earth, at the center of the universe. When we engage in dialogue, we too put ourselves at risk. We risk being misunderstood. We risk being rejected or even changed. But here's the paradox. Trust grows not because dialogue is safe, but because dialogue isn't safe. We instinctively trust people who stand up and say what they think, even as they risk. AI is very good at combining and performing human words. But friends, it risks nothing. But wait, AI does have a superpower, of course. It's information. It can draft your CV. It can run an entire customer service. And I've heard tell that in the coming years, the majority of content online will be created by AI. Frankly, I'm impressed. But because of the paradox of trust, AI cannot interact for us in our place. Not yet, anyway. Think for a minute about the example of chatbots. Therapy chatbots are becoming quite popular. Not the ones that you get when you call on the phone. Therapy chatbots. They're quite popular, and yet they have a fundamental limitation. People feel heard when they're working with chatbots. But when a moment of real pain arises, that's when patients realize instinctively that something's missing. Lived empathy. And let's face it, AI isn't programmed to say, hey, what are you talking about? You got to stop that. What you're saying is completely stupid. Even if it were programmed to talk like that, you wouldn't accept that kind of talk from anyone except somebody who truly cares about you. Why? Because they've shared experiences with you. They're willing to go through the delicate dance of dialogue to know you better and themselves, to build and safeguard your relationship with them. Now, if you're wondering, and you might be, that the issue is a little bit bigger than dinner conversation or talk therapy, you're not alone. We've all heard the rhetoric that warns us of the end of humanity at the hands of AI. Well, it's not all crazy talk. I was surprised in 2023 when the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, suddenly resigned from Google so that he could speak out about the risks of AI. Earlier this year, Sam Altman, on the other hand, who is the CEO of OpenAI, testified before the US Senate, suggesting that AI might be the greatest step forward for humanity of our time. Who's right? As we answer that question, our ability in dialogue matters. Because it's only through constant dialogue that we can ponder the ethical, the cultural, and the political effects of this inevitable world change. And that's why it's urgent that we have these conversations at all levels. And it's also urgent because this technology is developing faster than we can regulate or even comprehend it. And so these conversations have to happen at all levels, from the kitchen table all the way up to Parliament. And in fact, some of the best models come from grassroots practices. In Great Britain, hundreds of schools and classrooms are holding philosophy for children circles, where kids get to practice structured dialogue, listening, questioning, responding. I wish they had that in my grandkids' school. Because when we exercise our dialogue muscles, when we practice dialogue, we get ready for public discourse. But what can we do to protect and grow our human superpower of dialogue? First of all, I think we need to recognize its importance. And I hope that today this little speech will help you take a step in the direction of understanding how important it is. Secondly, we need to practice it and teach it at home with our friends and with our children. And then we need to get out there, and every chance we get, we need to engage in important dialogue about AI, but basically about everything, because practice maybe doesn't make perfect, but it certainly helps us grow. And finally, I think we need to condemn any deception by AI fakes and advocate policies so that will protect property, will protect human input, like the wonderful music that we heard earlier. These are big goals, but they start at home, where dialogue is lively and messy and sometimes loud. It is through this kind of practice that we can exercise our human superpower. Anybody wondering who won the great broccoli debate last week? They did. I love watching them exercise their superpower. Nobody's more convincing than a kid who hates broccoli. Their superpower, alive and well. But if they and we don't use it, we'll lose it. And before we give up our human superpower of dialogue, we need to talk. Thank you.